into getting into middle income status by 2030. Is that possible? Our panelists today are going to be telling us all about those topics. Now, of course, we are powered by Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe that promises comfort and luxury at its best. If you are to visit them, please do call the number on your screens for bookings. They do have a number of services like swimming, the gym, as you can see, accommodation, not forgetting conference centers where you can host each and every function that you may think about. Even weddings, they do have gardens in case you're interested in outdoor, but also conference centers if you're interested in putting your wedding indoors. They also have buffets and different cuisines for those of you who like fine dining. Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe is the place to be. They are located in the heart of Entebbe, right next to the International Airport of Entebbe. Today, I am privileged to have two guests on my panel, and we are going to explore consumer rights and, of course, Gouging, and a few questions here and there about taxation and how exactly our country can avoid going to the poverty levels, the worst. Yeah, we are not a rich country, but again, we are not so badly off. So how can we improve that particular part to make sure that we, become like other countries that are developing economically? And to take us through the discussion, we have Mr. Twamuhabwa, an economist and a former economic advisor at the Ministry of Finance, and as well as Mr. Bwambale, Benard, our programs director for consent. He's going to tell us more about consent. You're most welcome, gentlemen. Let me start with Bwambale. Benard, you're most welcome to studio.
Thank you so much, Caro, for hosting us. My name is Benard Bwambale. I work with Consent. Consent is the Global Consumer Center. We basically look at aspects around the consumers. What are consumers eating? What are they consuming? What are they buying? And what are their rights and responsibilities? But also diving into understanding how can we link consumers to the service providers who are giving us, the services, but also the goods. So basically, that is what we do on a daily basis with our colleagues. But also, of course, we want to see what are consumers complaining about and how can we make sense out of their complaints, bring them to the regulators, but also the regulators being able to advance, support the consumers down there. So basically, that is what Consent does on a daily basis.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. Mr. Twamuhabwa, you're most welcome to the show today.
Thank you very much, our moderator, Caro, and I'm happy to be back on Family TV to discuss a number of issues. I know I've seen the topic is wide, and I'll be grateful that at the end of the day, as the viewers and a number of people will be able to get what is important for us as individuals, but also as a country.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Mr. Wilson, would you tell us briefly about what you understand with when someone says consumer rights and responsibilities? What comes to your mind?
I've heard Mr. Bwambale that is an expert, but in terms of economics, in terms of commerce,
yes,
a consumer is usually the final user of a product. And if he's a final user of a product, one of the issues that should come out of our minds is what type of product this person is getting and what value is it adding. And if you get what type of product is, what are you going to use to produce it? That's one. But also, what value is it going to add? Is it in terms of monetary terms? Is it the consumption might be in different ways. So when you are looking at the consumer in the chain of production, he is the final person that is involved in the usage of a particular product, which goes through various chains of production. And at different levels of production, I think as we go forward, you will see that every person plays his or her own role. Let me go to the classic example, the milk. If you are processing milk, there's a person who looks after cows, the person who brings whatever cows feed on, if they are not the free range, and then you do the milking, you put the milk in the machine, you take it to the cooling machine. Yes. And then from there are certain raw materials in terms of the whatever they add in for it to make it for packaging processes. So then you find, for me and you walk into the shop, you find Jessa, you find is it dairy what? Different types of, I think there are different types. But they have gone through a metamorphosis process. And that process, you are doing it, preparing your person, your final person to take it. And that's what maybe I would call the stages where the protection mechanism should come in. What are those that you are going to apply to make sure the customer, the consumer is not affected? So you can be affected health-wise, you can be affected economically in terms of pricing. If the consumer doesn't get the best value which suits him or her, then it means he's affected negatively. If the consumer takes a product and it affects his health, then the different stages of protection of a consumer varies from what you are looking at. But me, in terms of economics, is purely on how does the person get benefit out of that product economically. Okay. What value does it add to him in terms of monetary terms? What value does it add to him in terms of him and as a nation? Because when a consumer takes a product, he pays taxes. And those taxes are transferred to construct a nation. In terms of, I'm not talking about political construction. I'm talking about of economic construction in terms of infrastructure that need to support that consumer. Because in the end, if the consumer pays a price on a product, there is what we call value-added tax. Yes. And that value-added tax comes in because at the different levels of production, from the manufacturer to either distributor, from the distributor who sends it to the supermarket, then to the consumer, there are different levels where people, those involved keep paying tax, what we call value-added tax. But then the final person who bears the burden is the consumer, because he's going to pay for the value added on that particular product because he's consuming it. And when he's consuming it, he expects, after paying the money, which involves, which has tax, to get a service. Yeah. In forms of either roads, either in forms of hospital, either in forms of schools. That's how the consumer, in terms of protection, for me, economically, can be looked at. And another aspect I think we have to look at is the exploitation. Okay. Uganda, before, and even now, there are some instances where these consumers, we're talking about me and you, we bear the burden of a number of people due to some reasons. One, people go and import goods and services. And the government says we are adding 100 shillings per litre or 50 shillings. They take advantage of the situation. You find when it gets here, they hike the prices. So those are some of the instances, when you talk about consumer protection in terms of pricing. Is he or she being exploited, or is getting the right value of the product that the person is buying? So economically, in terms of commerce, the production of goods and services passes through various chains. And the final person who takes the product is the consumer. And that consumer has whatever is being done from the beginning must factor in that particular person. If you don't, and I think I want to mention it here properly. Yes. If you don't factor in the person you're producing for, in terms of chains of production, that's why at times you find goods on the shelves with dust. Because either you have done a product in a wrong way, he will talk about it, I believe. It does not suit the needs, so you must do feasibility study before you do that product. Or the pricing has sent them off. So, as you do production, I've heard you doing a marketing advert for Protea Hotel. If Protea Hotel is going to prepare a buffet, they must be sure that when Karo gets there, has the capacity to pay for that buffet. So, in terms of the production chain, some of us, in terms of economics, in terms of commerce, we might not consume the same products, but they might be related products. If you can't take this, they must be having a choice in terms of economics. A consumer must have a choice. If I can't take this, I must be able to take this.
Okay.
I think that's very, very important. If you cannot take gas, let's say you are going to use gas for cooking, and you find the price is high, what can you take on the market? Do you have a stove? You know, I although it is having a problem. We just call it a stove. I don't know how they call it in.
Charcoal stove?
No, this one which they use, which you use paraffin or whatever. Kerosene.
Oh.
Yeah. If you find you cannot use the gas, because I remember when I got out of university in early 90, when I was shopping to start my new life, I bought that
the green
Kerosene lamp.
the green lamp. So to go and so I can use it for cooking until I bought a coil.
Okay.
So what choices do consumers have on the market? It's very, very important.
Yeah.
So it's important that in terms of production, in terms of commerce and economics, choice is also very, very important. Apart from price, choice. But then the good thing with the consumer protection and in terms of the products and goods and services, a consumer is a very big person. When you are pricing, I think this is very important. We need to know that the consumer has an option not to take the product. What do I mean? When you look at our taxation policy, where we are saying that the consumer pays value-added tax on the product he's consuming, he or she can choose not to take that product. It's not mandatory. Because I normally hear people, no, they're overtaxing us, If you can take sugar, and moreover, it's not advisable at my age to be taking sugar because you fall sick. So I can avoid that tax. You know, that's why consumers are protected. To me, I think, in terms of taxation, Uganda, I think, is and other countries, because we learn from other countries, like the Western countries, where we put very added tax on goods which are taken by the final person. I think people are being protected. It's not mandatory. Me and you, I don't take a beer. So if you put taxes on VAT on beer,
it doesn't affect you.
You know, it doesn't affect me. So I think those are ways of protecting. You have a choice. You can take this, you can't take it.
Okay.
You can. So to me, I think consumer protection in terms of economics is that the person must have a choice of what is he or she going to take. The pricing must be suiting that particular person. If it doesn't suit him, he has also that beautiful choice of saying, I cannot take it. I will do away with it, without it.
Okay.
So to me, I think, in terms of taxation, Uganda, tax policy, in the tax regime, favors the consumer a lot because the consumers have the choice on what to take and not what to take.
Okay.
And that's why at times maybe you find the business people are saying, we are stuck, we are not selling. Because consumers, in one way or the other, they raise their voice and say, no, this thing is high. I can choose to walk. If the petrol station, if the fuel is high, I can choose to walk. And you keep with your fuel in your depot. So to me, I think consumer protection in terms of taxation, Ugandans have had a very beautiful tax regime that favors them and gives them an opportunity to make the choice. That's what I can make for the meantime.
Thank you so much. Mr. Bwambale, do you have anything to add on consumer rights and responsibility before we cross to substandard products?
Okay, so thank you so much, my colleague, for bringing out real aspects on consumer protection.
Okay.
One of the challenges we are suffering from in this country is that the consumer is claimed to be the boss. You know, you hear every business entity saying, "Oh, the consumer is my boss." But in principle, is this statement real? That's where the problem is. So, basic needs are one of the rights that we have as consumers. So, consumers have a right to have the basics: water, electricity, and whatever, clothing, food. But are these basic goods, are these basic services available, and are they of quality that requires that the consumer requires? If you go to hospital now, most of the people who are hospitalized now are there because of three reasons.
Okay.
Either they have eaten less food, or they have eaten too much food, or they have eaten unsafe food. Now, you can imagine if you have a right to basic needs that are safe food, but the food you're having is unsafe, then you go to the hospital. So why would you have agriculture, cultivate a lot of food, go and sell it or consume it when it is not safe, and then it takes you to the hospital? So the basics of a consumer really having the basic needs is priority to this country, but the safety should be guaranteed that every product, every good, everything that the consumer has access to is actually safe. So that brings us to the second right of the consumer. You have a right to safety, that everything you have should be safe. Let me give you some bit of examples here. You see consumers, you go to a border stage, and then you see a border at 7 p.m. and it has no lamps. It has no mirrors. And then you jump on it. It means you are not aware of what you're supposed to actually do. Why should you be ridden on a motorcycle that has no lamps in the night? So it means that we are not informed. We are not even aware of how do I select a good or a service to undertake. So consumers have to be very careful as well to ensure that are the services I'm going to take on safe. I have seen consumers many times now, for us who come from the milk area. A gentleman sells you a cup of milk and is packing for you milk in a cavera, but he first blows air in a cavera and the consumer takes that milk. Who does that?
Oh.
You know you're going to buy a cup of milk at 2,000 shillings. A colleague pours the milk in a cavera and first blows in air. What if he has COVID? What if he has tuberculosis? And that's why many of our children, especially under 5s, are actually suffering from cough and flus that are never curing.
Oh.
Why? Because they consume a lot of tuberculins from the milk sellers. So the safety of the product alone is supposed to be guaranteed. The other right is about information. Every consumer must be informed. And so they are able to make choices from the informed point of view. Now look here. Last year and the other year, we had our maize banned from crossing to Kenya and Southern Sudan. So when it was banned, because of the aflatoxin contents in the maize, the question has always been, where did it go thereafter? The consumers are not aware of where that food went. So certainly we're also sure that that maize came back and the consumers ate it. Unfortunately, the consumers who consumed this food, which came back, first of all, we lost a lot of money as a country. The other year, we lost about, I don't know how many trillions of money from a consignment that was bounced from Kenya. We lost another income that was supposed to come back from Sudan because they rejected. There is also, if you go to Rwanda, they have rejected our maize, our eggs severally. We are losing a lot of money just because we are playing with lives of consumers in other countries, and for them they have refused. Now for us, we are consuming what other countries cannot consume. The question is, how is government, or how are we protecting our consumers? If the other consumers abroad cannot consume a particular product, how come that us, the consumers of this country, are eligible to consuming them? This is where consumer protection challenges come in handy. The other time we talked with UNBS asking, so what is the maize? They also don't know where the maize is. And it was consumed by a consumer here. And of course, not forgetting that people who produced that maize already made a loss. Now we're trying to look at the money income issues. They lost a lot of money that they would have gotten from the international market. And we lost it that way. Okay. So another is about awareness creation. Who is supposed to create this awareness to the consumer? Remember I said that the consumer is supposed to be informed, but who is informing them? We have a number of standards. One of the standards on labeling of products is that when you're labeling a product, put the name of the product, put the quantities, put the expiry, and all this. Now, there is a lot of that information provided for on the packaging materials, but are consumers even informed? Are they even able to read it? Let me give you a scenario. People don't take milk. We have a group of people who don't take milk. They are intolerant to lactose. So whenever they consume milk, they have upsets. And they also know that. There are also other colleagues who don't take eggs. They know I don't eat eggs. They go to the supermarket and buy biscuits. The person who made biscuits has indicated that there is milk, there is eggs. Yeah, he has put the information there. But the consumer is not interested in knowing what is in there. So at the end of the day, a consumer eats something that they actually don't consume. And at the end of the day, they end up having challenges. We have also seen many people in our setting. You know, a consumer, whenever they go to a restaurant, Every person who sells food or who cooks food in a polythene bag commits murder. I think that should be clear. Anybody who sells food in a polythene bag commits murder. Now, our consumers are predisposed to food which has been cooked in polythene bags. Every time the polythene bag heats up, the things that were used to make the polythene.
A polythene bag is a kavera, ladies and gentlemen.
Yes, the
so
kavera.
The black kavera
Yes.
that we used to cook
black
matoke.
kavera, green kavera, everybody who cooks food there commits murder. In other words, we are trying to kill our bosses who are the consumers. Remember you said the consumer is my boss, but you're giving your boss poisons from the kavera, because every time the kavera heats up, the thins melt and they go into the food. And so this consumer keeps taking those things in the food, and at the end of the day, many of our consumers get the cancers. And so when will they come back to buy our food? I think we need to respect consumers because they are the bosses at the end of the value chain, and I think we must be careful how we handle issues around the consumer. And maybe lastly, the consumer is supposed to have redress. Where does the consumer go after they have eaten substandard food, after they have gotten substandard items? Whom do they run it to? It should be always a question. Do we have mechanisms in this country where someone can complain and they can be heard? Are consumers in position to put up their statement and say, guys, look here, we don't have these services, we need them, and so we can be able to redress?
Okay.
So I think as we move forward with the discussion around consumer protection, those are some of the concerns around the rights that we need to think about.
All right,
Yeah.
Thank you very much. But before we even cross to that, there is no legislation in Uganda that specifically deals with consumer protection. Uganda Consumer Protection Rights Association proposed the Consumer Protection Bill 2015 to help in this particular problem of consumer protection. But the bill does not define exactly who the consumer is, and it hasn't even been discussed yet. From the economic perspective, has government done enough to ensure consumer protection? Yet there is even no legislation, Mr. Twamuhabwa.
Well, I think the government has put in place mechanism at different levels.
Okay.
In terms of the final use of products, of goods and services. And some of these things, I remember when I was still in the financial sector, in banking, you would find that they're embedded in your day-to-day activities. If you are talking about the consumer protection, it's about product development, it's about service delivery. So I think, to me, the government, in terms of the provision or the mechanism of how things can be handled, I think those instances are there. Well, I've had my colleague talking about it. But I think people have a right to complain. They have a right to express their views. A case in point is of recent. We have seen it downtown here. They have expressed their dissatisfaction. So I think the government has a mechanism, and the government is listening talking to them. So as a nation where people have all different levels of administration, we have seen it happening. But in terms of legislation, maybe policy formulation, let me go to terms of policy formulation.
Okay.
You look at our policies, they are all geared towards the final end use of the product. When you look at the policies that are being developed, and how do you serve his or her interests? I think that's why the government comes in. So to me, the activists or the NGOs, or I don't know who
Stakeholders.
The stakeholders, it's incumbent upon them if they want a specific law to engage with the legislators and see how the law can come. But in terms of the policy formulation, for the last 8 years, when I've been involved in the policy formulation of this country, I think we have been trying as much as possible. How do we get to that final person? How does he or she feel that the country cares. I think that's what we have been trying to do.
Yeah.
We have been trying to make sure that the policies we put in place, if they are health policies, if they are education policies, and even we go ahead as in terms of policy to finance them. So he has talked about we have Uganda Bureau of Standards. We give Uganda Bureau of Standards money. We give them resources to recruit more manpower to ensure that the processes go to the market. They are usually all in conformity with the standards that are required. Yeah. And I think that's very, very important. I know at times the government meets some resistance even when it applies some of those mechanisms, because it involves a cost to put a stamp on a bottle of water. You know, then it adds some more cost. But I know government has put in place mechanisms like Uganda Bureau of Standards. We have had Uganda Revenue Authority itself also makes sure to check that the goods which are in the market, which people are consuming, are not counterfeit products, that they conform to the standards of this nation. So to me, I think the government has different bodies that have been involved in ensuring that our final person that consumes the products in this nation, because as he has said, they're the ones who pay the taxes to the country. And this country is there because of them. So we have to make sure that whatever is done is in conformity with what we need as a nation. So I think the policy formulation has been geared toward that. Okay. But if there is the legislation that is needed to be added on, the stakeholders can engage with the people who are involved, but to see that they go beyond what is being done. But to me, I think the mechanisms on how even they can complain are there. They can register complaints. They can sue. Even you can sue. I've seen people suing organizations because of mishandling either the products they have given them. Maybe the issue he has talked about in terms of the awareness. Maybe awareness can be taken to another level. But to me, I think people have a mechanism how to redress their complaints and how they can have them being resolved. Well, I've seen people even winning cases against companies. We have lawyers everywhere. People who are specialists in those areas, they have been taking up cases. We believe that if there is anything that is not yet to the standard, it can be harmonized. But I think as a nation, all the policies have been geared towards protecting the final end user of the products that are being produced in this market. Okay. And it has been really helpful.
Thank you. Mr. Bwambale, yes. Before we go for a short break, do you agree with what Mr. Wilson has said? And also, do you have any other points on how consumer rights can be protected? You've been telling us about substandard products, and how can this issue be sorted, in your opinion?
I think the principles are the same. Every law that is supposed to come in this country must have a perspective of a consumer. Because at the end of the day, the consumers are the ones also consuming the law itself. When you go to the financial institutions, the other time I was making fun, go to our banks, you'll be surprised that the consumers may not have toilets in the banks. The toilets are there, but are for staff. So what about this consumer who's coming to receive your service? So I think it's about how do we embed the rights and responsibilities of consumers, their rights within the existing law. But of course, it would be good that we have an independent law, but of course not forgetting that every law that is supposed to be made in this country must have a consumer lens, because the consumer is the end user of the law or any regulation that comes on board. But also the other would be the existing laws. Are they working? Are they actually providing solution to these challenges? Because every law has something to do with the consumer, but the issue has been around the actual implementation and enforcement of the existing legislations, the standards, and the laws. So in basics, we would need to think that, okay, whereas we advocate for another law, let us also evaluate whether there are existing laws which have consumer protection, whether they're actually making sense or whether they're actually working. If they're not working, what do we need to do? And as I've said, even our colleagues who are supposed to be enforcing, they also don't know these laws. Let me give you an example. You've gone to downtown and you find a welding plant and a restaurant and a saloon in the same place. So each of those is having a license. Someone is licensed to run a welding point, but the welding point is closer to a restaurant. Actually, the next door is a restaurant, and the next door is a saloon. So how can these three be in the same location? And all of them have license. It means that whoever is giving us license, the three of us here, is lacking something. Either they don't understand that you're supposed to inspect a place where you are selling food and a place where you have to set a welding point. If welding is happening and a woman is cooking food here, what is happening? There is a lot of transfer of metallic compounds in food. Whereas we are thinking about buy Uganda and build Uganda, the quality of the product has to come in handy. We shouldn't speak about these things differently. They should be talked about at the same time. We have seen many of our vehicles. Let us use an example of vehicles. Many of the vehicles are being washed closer to the water sources. But we have a whole policy on water, we have a whole policy on all these things. But you go and check most of the washing bays we have in this country, even where our government officials and organizations are washing their cars, they wash a vehicle while petroleum products are actually going back to the water source and someone is picking water right there. So does that really need another law? It is just very obvious. What is the standard for a washing bay? What is the standard of establishing which kind of service? All those laws are in place. We just need to make sure that we put an enforcement lens to it so that we can be able to protect our consumers. Otherwise, we shall have many laws and others get duplicated. We have, for example, a Public Health Act. It talks about everything that you would think about when it comes to protection of consumers in the health sector, in what, all those that you may ever heard of. Imagine in our country where we know that people are selling us food using transformer oil. We know it. I hope you've seen in the papers all over.
Yes.
We know it, but the question would be, how many times have we seen inspectors going to close areas where we have seen transformer oil being used for consumer food? These are the questions. How many times have we seen the enforcers coming up to say, no, look here guys, transformer oil is now in use. We have a whole regulatory authority for electricity. Whole regulatory authority. And then here comes a scenario that people are using transformer oil to prepare human food. So where is the transformer oil coming from? Where are they getting it? Is transformer oil in the market? Is it supposed to be anyway on the market? Who is regulating it? So even when we are crying for law and policy and whatever, there is a whole authority which has mandate to regulate distribution of electricity and all this. So the question comes, how are people accessing what they're not supposed to access? Is it in the name of Build Uganda and all that? We need also to start thinking whether our consumers are really the bosses of projects or whatever in this country. If we look at other substandard items that we have seen on the market lately, you'll realize that let us go to agriculture a little bit. We have highly hazardous pesticides on the market in Uganda. Highly hazardous pesticides, which cannot be used actually where they are coming from. You will be surprised that over 51% of the chemical compounds we are using in agriculture here are not used where they are coming from. And this is common information. It is all over there. Not that it is hearsay. They are written, they are documented. So the question is, where are these substandard products coming from and who is supposed to regulate them? Where is the regulator in this case? If the ministry is supposed to regulate it, we have a register for chemicals in this country. But go to that register, you'll also be surprised that even those which were banned a few years ago, they are still existing. So we need to think about how do we manage the situation at hand? How do we deal with the available regulations to actually protect our consumers? Even when we are planning to have another regulation come on, the bill has been submitted, it's being discussed here and there. Let us also first look at those which are existing. Are we making sense of them?
Are they impactful?
Are they impactful to society? Anyway.
Thank you so much, gentlemen, for this beautiful discussion. Issues at Hand takes a very short break. We return shortly with the discussion. Don't go away.
Issues at Hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Family TV, enriching lives. Family TV, enriching lives. Issues at hand, powered by
Protea Hotel by Marriott Entebbe. Comfort and luxury at its best.
Yes, you're still watching Issues at Hand here on Church of Uganda Family TV, and we are of course discussing, exploring consumer rights and responsibilities and all the factors that surround that topic. Now remember to follow the conversation on our social media platforms at Church of Uganda Family TV, on X, on Facebook and YouTube, where we are live, and you can comment and of course tell us what you think about this particular topic, like and share with a friend. Now I'm still here with the gentlemen who are my guests for today, Bwambale Benard and Wilson Twamuhabwa. I'd like to start with Bwambale Benard. I hear, or according to the news that I'm reading,
Yes.
there is a lot of food fraud.
Yes.
And I would like you to tell us a little bit about food fraud and its challenges that are now incumbent with us.
All right, thank you so much once again for the opportunity. Of course, a lot of food fraud is happening in this country, but maybe we could think about what is this food fraud we are talking about. Maybe you're providing something you're calling food, but in actual sense, it is something else. So we've seen a lot of adulteration of food. Let us look at milk. Many people are giving us milk in the name of giving us food, which is actually milk. But then in the milk, someone has put added water, and probably from a flowing, stream. Someone just goes to the stream and picks water and adds it in the milk. The other time I was in one of the communities, and one colleague who was selling milk got gumboots. So he had the milk can from his boss, and he was taking the milk to the market. So he decided to get gumboots and fetched water from a stream.
With the gumboots?
Yes, and we were watching him at a distance, and I was like, what is this? And he added it in the can. So this is part of food fraud. But also we look at...
And he didn't apprehend him.
Immediately. If you go to Kabarole, they just had to hold him, and we arrested him. But also, we've seen these days people who are preserving for us food. You've seen currently news running that many of the guys who are selling meat and milk are now using formalin in treatment of this. Now, formalin is a chemical compound we use in health to actually treat dead bodies. So when a colleague has died and we don't want them to spoil, we don't want them to smell, we get formalin and, we preserve their bodies. Now, colleagues go and pick formalin and then they put it in the meat and in the milk so that the milk stays longer, the meat keeps longer. This is part of food fraud. Why would you give people meat, which would be actually good food, and then you're adding formalin, which is a treatment for dead bodies, for human beings? So all of these things have to come in when you're talking about food fraud. This is what makes us annoyed. You ask yourself, why are they accessing formalin in the first place? Where is the regulation? At what point are these public health drugs supposed to be? Those are things we need to talk about. The other way is all our children are in school, all of them. But do you realize that these days there are schools out there that are using kerosene or paraffin in treatment of beans? Someone gets paraffin or kerosene, they even put it on the budget, and parents are paying a lot of money, and someone gets paraffin or kerosene and puts it in the beans of our children. You are keeping them for long, you don't want the weevils to come in there. But also with unscientific allegations that when someone is taking paraffin in the beans, if it's a boy, then the libido levels will go lower. If they are girls, you're preventing them from hysteria. This is food fraud. Imagine a girl who is consuming paraffin for 3 months in a term, 2 plates per day. You get it? And so when this girl grows and she's an adult, she goes out there, she gets married, time for delivery comes. Why would you expect this girl to push a baby? Inside there, the whole place is very soft because the tenderness brought about by the paraffin. And that's why many girls probably are being, every girl that is giving birth, woman, they go into a C-section. We're not investigating those. But go to the schools, you'll realize what I'm talking about. People are putting paraffin in children's food. Who does this? We have also gone to the stores where people are actually selling grain or legumes. You realize that you've heard about rat poison, rodent poison. What we use to kill the rats in our villages down there. People get it and put it in the bins so that the weevils don't come in there. Forgetting that your neighbor yesterday or the other day died, committed suicide after taking the same tablet, and you're busy putting it in the human food. So you're giving food which is actually not food. This is part of food fraud. If you go to eastern Uganda and other parts of this country, you find a lot of maize, a lot of cassava on the tarmac road.
Yes.
Common sense. Tarmac is made from tar, a chemical compound that if consumed, it can kill a human being. Now for you, you go ahead and put maize on top there and then it dries fast. Fine. If you're moving under the sun, you realize that the tarmac heats up and you see it actually even shining, what we used to call mirage in physics. Now every time that tarmac, what people call colas, every time it melts and there is food on top there, certainly the tar enters into the food, and this is human food, and then we end up having a lot of food which is contaminated with this kind of aspect. And at the end of the day, we keep pretending that we have food, but actually when you are giving people contaminated food. And maybe if you go to our markets, let us go back to our markets, you realize that these days people harvest tomatoes or harvest any other vegetables and they dip it in a chemical compound to keep it longer. Now, who does that? The chemical is supposed to be done, to be applied in the garden, so that 2 weeks down the road, the chemical has broken down into a system and then it cannot be affecting the human being. Now, we are seeing women and men whom you'd literally think that these are adults. But of course, I don't blame them. Somehow there's a lot of stuntedness. They go and pick the chemical and apply it on the food in the market. Look at this poor consumer coming to buy tomatoes, and then you're buying tomatoes, but on top of the tomatoes, you see a white-like stuff, like powder on a tomato. But also because the consumers are not informed, they would prefer having those kind of tomatoes that they will keep for long. But actually, you're going to eat kachumbari, meaning you're eating live chemical on it. You're eating Marcozeb on the tomato live there. So all these are part of fraud. If you look at now our current status, many people, when you're moving up country, you find someone measuring for you beans or anything, and then you realize that they are using cans. But at the bottom of the can, there are stones or sand, and then on top there is food. Or the food which is weevilled is mixed with another good food, and so you end up having a mixture. So you're buying 2 kilograms of something, but in actual sense, they are only maybe 0.6. So all of that is part of food fraud. And I think we need to do something in this country to make sure that our consumers are actually protected against eating food that is actually not safe. And maybe Mr. Mugisha knows that every meat that is supposed to be eaten in this country is supposed to be stamped. That is a law. It is supposed to be inspected and stamped to show that it's actually. But we see that a lot of meat is being stamped with the wrong stamps. And who's responsible? You have a whole authority in Kampala, a whole authority everywhere, which is supposed to be ascertaining that this is actually food. But at the end of the day, we have food that is not inspected, meat is not inspected, meat has very wrong stamps on it, and we are giving to consumers to eat. So all of these really explain the food fraud aspects in this country, and we need to do a lot of work to ensure that we protect our consumers from having access to unsafe food.
Thank you very much. Maybe Mr. Twamuhabwa, we can end with how we can economically improve the standards of these particular products to prevent ourselves from that kind of food fraud. It is said that the poverty levels in Uganda are high, and that is why people are doing things in a shoddy way, because they don't have enough money to go through all the processes of giving people quality food. So what do you say about this?
I think this is an interesting scenario. Maybe I will engage with my friend afterwards. Okay. But what I'm getting and what I think is at stake is more to do with enforcement and the Nyamparas. We used to call them the Nyamparas, the supervisors. They have a lot of work to do on their table.
Okay.
And if they are not the ones involved in these funny businesses, then something must be done. Yeah. Because if it's not done, then we're not building an economy. You know, if it's an agricultural sector, you know, remember around 68% of the people that are in agriculture, which is subsistence. And His Excellency the President and the manifesto of NRM is focusing on transitioning them to a more commercialized system of agriculture. But if you have also counterfeit products in agriculture, where this economy depends most, then we are doomed.
Yeah, sure.
So to me, I think it's important that the stakeholders who are responsible for supervision, the Nyamparas, they take up this task as quickly as possible. But also, I would like to encourage and first appreciate the work of the organizations that are involved in some of these things, are doing research and whatever. Maybe to make some of their findings available to the relevant bodies for the bodies to take action. But I think if we don't do a lot of supervision, if we don't do a crampdown on some of these activities, then our economy is going to run into problems because we will not be able to compete internationally.
Yeah.
Because, you know, any economy, we are looking at exporting goods and services, trying to produce goods here now, which we have been importing. So we must make sure that these goods we are producing, they compete on international level. So maybe it is also a high time as a government, we empowered financially, and I want to make financial, I think, and in terms of manpower, who are up to the task to organizations like Uganda Bureau of Standards, and task them to make sure that they do. If they don't do, we whip them. Because we are looking at making Uganda already, the readings on the whole is that we are a middle income status in our country. So if we have to maintain that level and become a higher income status country, we must be able to compete with countries like China, countries like India, countries like America and the rest on the international market. And for your goods to be acceptable at the international market, their standards you must meet.
Yes.
So I think now we must look at the policies that are going to take us that level. And the policies to take us that level is that we must look at how we can look at the bodies that are going to regulate these standards, be able to work. If they are not working, we put them off. But also before we look at going to compete at the international level, what are our people consuming? Because you are looking at for you to have an economy vibrant, you must have a healthy working population.
True.
That's priority number one. If you don't have a healthy working population, you can't build an economy. Because the economy is built by brain, it's built by labor or manpower. So if you have people who are sick, let's say 3/4 of your people are always in hospital, then the economy is gone.
Exactly.
You cannot. You are going to divert funds to the health sector to see that you treat the sick people instead of doing other things. So if you have 3/4 of the people working, then you have incomes. What we call they earn incomes and then spend and then save. Then you have a population that is now vibrant and working. But if the population is 100% full time, they have eaten poisonous food. Full time they have eaten, what is they are consuming is not healthy for them. Then as an economy, we are not doing very well. So to me, I would appeal and to all our viewers and if there are regulators involved, policymakers, that we focus on how do we supervise the areas that are our concern for our consumers. How do we promote financial literacy? It's important. Financial literacy. Do people who go to the bank know what they are consuming? Because that's also an important area. We are talking about private sector. Private sector is the one driving this economy.
Okay.
So if the private sector people go to the bank and they are just taking products which are not helping them, somebody wants a school loan, you give him a mortgage loan, then will the children go to school? So
Because of
it's a whole issue that requires concerted effort by players in the government at different levels for them to ensure that the supervision is stepped up to the level that is required to produce goods and services that can match the standards that we need.
Because of time, we shall end the discussion here. Maybe we will be back with these gentlemen another time to conclude the discussion. Thank you so much for being a part of Church of Uganda Family TV, as well as Issues at Hand. My name is Carol. Have a good day. Bye.
The views expressed on this show are not necessarily those of this television or its management, but as of individuals as we hear them.